Good evening, gamers. Today we will be discussing a great passion of mine and putting it in the context of High Road, world building. So, here's the MS Paint first draft of Kathadak, the next province they're going to. We've got a few challenges here. One, the world map has become incredibly important because they need to move it around with an army and they need to fight battles that take place within its context. They also need to be doing quests around it. So, a lot to tackle, and we want to display different biomes. We want to show the devastation of the pollution and overuse of resources that's gone on here. We want to show the feral wilderness that has resisted all attempts to exploit it and hardened, and you can imagine crazed druids out in the woods and servants of yet stranger things out there. I'm going to introduce some more of the Lovecraftian elements of the setting through that. But we also see the river networks that are so vital. We're going to be approaching from... bedazzled myself. From Ava, where they presently are. And we have the Gorge of the Gorge School, which they are learning more about and is being alluded to as a place they will probably go to. We've got Axehead, they'll probably never visit. Ash Pit, they're supposed to take down. And Kathadak, where this whole arc will meet its climax. Now we're going to have lots of cliff faces, and they're going to be inhabited by ogres, trolls, and orcs. They're going to be introduced to a lot of different kinds of entities and creatures and societies and cultures they've never met before. And they're going to see what the Aurori are like in their own environment. We're going to explore the concept of belonging, and we're going to adjust where this river comes out so it runs through the Shire instead of... because it's a gorge, but is that an active one? I feel like maybe I put a lake over here, honestly, and then two trickles out. I digress. But yeah, we have a lot of things to look forward to, and I'm going to take sort of an Ubisoft light approach to how I build this map and this terrain, which is to say, in an Ubisoft open world game, they've homogenized into essentially the same thing, unfortunately, or fortunately in our case, because it's an easier reference point. You can play any of them, know what I'm talking about. You have little things to do, which build up meters that are good for you, and you have towers, radio towers, watchtowers, pyro towers, whatever they were in Far Cry Primal, and they light up. Hey, here's the thing to do. Now, we're going to put this in a D&D context. I'm not going to fully mechanicalize this. We're not designing a video game. But let's think about in D&D, how do people learn about stuff? Maybe it's an ambient dialogue, maybe it's a spy they send out. And in this case, we know they're being supported by the Cult in Shadows, a kind of thieves guild in my setting that has a religious connotation and is sort of like Oblivion's thieves guild, and people deny its existence. Because if they know it's real, they don't want to let that on, and if they don't, well, I mean, that sounds a little silly, and all these various groups that are supposedly associated with it, they don't seem to be that big. They're probably just using the specter of the idea of the Cult in Shadows, right? But it's real, and they're going to help them and supply them on their way through this province. So we can imagine that various taverns and other shady meeting locations will be contact meetups for them, and that's where they're going to meet the local Cult in Shadows operatives whose criminal networks have a whole hit list of here's how we can damage Cathadak's legitimacy. Here's how we can damage the logistics of the local garrison. Here is the local garrison that you can hit. Here are potentially disenfranchised people who would join a revolution or had sympathies to the past regime and have since been treated unwell but are still alive and out there and will almost certainly be interested in the former ruler's daughter coming to fight a war of liberation as they arrive in the east. So they come along the Serpa River, and we imagine that they will be in a heavily cliffed area to begin their adventure, coming off of the plains and going into the valley and the more verdant in some ways and places area. The gorge will act as both landmark and roadblock. It's going to be hard to get past this region. I also want to introduce the idea of like a diamond coal sort of worm. Well, not a dragon, because of dragons in my settings being nigh-deific entities. Worms are the dragons who gave up their godlike powers and biologically reproduced, and they live for a very long time, but they're not immortal in the same way as a dragon and they're still very potent and dangerous. And so we imagine a worm which is perhaps rested here for generations, and came out through the pressure a diamond worm. But the process going from a coal worm to a diamond worm, and we're sort of establishing some sort of mineralogical relationship to dragon in the setting here. I'm not sure if I like that, but I do enjoy the aesthetics of like the middle of the plate is like hard and shiny and crusted out like a diamond, but in the edges you have like the coal veins. I just enjoy that aesthetically for some reason, so fuck it, that's what I'm going with. Yeah, and so it's going to be somewhere around here, and there's going to be an ancient passageway which it guards. And if you don't want to do that, you have to go through a dungeon. But the dungeon is, you know, a dungeon, and its main doorways are all sealed. But there is a ways that an adventurous adventurer might be able to get in. So here we're going to introduce how the game flows, and how it flows from a dungeon, from an overland army stroke Oregon Trail simulator back to dungeon crawling, and then back out again, having gained progress in the form of levels and gear and gold, but also in terms of overworld progression. And as we build the story of Kathadak, as we create the world building elements and we revisit old world building elements, like how in Eastern Kathadak you're supposed to break into utensils with meat, but in Western Kathadak you're supposed to break them in with veggies. It's weird little elements that tell you these people have a unique culture and history and tradition and lives that they would otherwise be happily leading if it wasn't for the fact that, you know, there are a lot of things wrong in their lives and in their province, and they want it to be fixed, even if they're not willing or able to do anything about it right now because the time hasn't arisen. We're going to tell that story, and we're going to tell that story on all of these levels: the mechanical level, the story level, and the player experience level, which I would call somewhere in between, because what you experience is a combination of everything: the presentation, the funny voices, the feeling of getting a nat 20 on a critical hit, the feeling of getting new gear, the feeling of sitting down and having a conversation with some person who has a unique perspective or tradition that you're not familiar with. One thing that stuck with the party for a long time is that one village where getting an anorak to shine your belt buckle is good luck for a year. So with all of that ramble out of the way, I'm going to dive in here, and I'm just going to take a hard scribble. We're actually going to make a new layer called dark, and we're going to cut out the province, more or less like that. Is opacity not 100? No, this is just an incredibly large. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and make this a 10 pixel brush. The Avon approach will be there. Here's where the Shire will be. Not necessarily display every border, but you know. There's no reason to not use as much of this map as possible. So yeah, we sort of understand where those political lines are. I know, I just fucked up on what layer I was clicking on. So we want to leave some stuff to be placeables on the map. Towns, yeah, let me show you really quick Saffron province, first one I made. Towns and stuff. You see that I included the hills and mountains sort of haphazardly into the map form itself. I think I'm going to avoid that this time, and I'll use little map icons that will help do that work for me. Use geysers, use wagons. Yeah, so like, you know, I'll use this to throw down a mountain, so I'll have more freedom. So here, we're purely going to be painting the biomes of Kathadak and the bodies of water. I'm going to use this grayish brown to denote actually with elevation. Now I'm getting stuck up on how we do elevation in like Roll20 maps versus how you do elevation in general. Because like here, you see that like lightness has to do with how forward it is, but also how high up it is. I think I'm going to use light to denote high, actually. Well, we'll check back in once I've done it. Well, folks, here we are after all of that. I wanted to go with lighter for higher elevation, mixed with the darker color at the base of the gorge. And we have our major population centers, and we've moved them over to Roll20. And we've got some more posts up about this on the Patreon. If you're a patron there, you'll be getting access to this video a week early. If you're a person of the future, then you've already gotten this. But of course, if you like this sort of content and you want to see more in-depth discussion of world building, what we're going to do with places like these, well, I suppose, you know, Ogre Camp, York Camp, the different ways to proceed through the rivers, and how we're going to shape this world that our players are going to have. You know, it's a lot more dense over here on the west. It's not that there's stuff over here, it's just that they're not going to get there yet. And basically guiding them because they have to bring the army. I can more easily keep them moving together through certain regions. Yeah, into this hilly river valley. Meet up at Rodachi and then think about how they're going to take Ashpit. I'm going to sign off now. We're under 1.5 hours out, and we'll see how it went. And maybe I'll do an after-action report where we contemplate how things went on High Road. But for the moment, I will see you on the flip side, dreamers and cubists. See you in the dreamscape.